My name is Rio Sin. I am from India, the village of Un. I have a son, Vivan. I miss him very much. I haven't seen him for a long time. Because I died. A couple of months ago, I came across research by scientists from the University of Virginia, Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson. They studied cases where children claimed to remember their previous lives. And most importantly, the facts about past lives were confirmed. That is, because he said he was a towel, researchers found data about previous identities and confirmed that the children were telling the truth. I have 3 men who will kill me. This is pseudoscience. The National Science Foundation of the USA considers belief in reincarnation to be one of the most common pseudoscientific misconceptions. I have repeatedly said that I do not believe in all this because it seems to me that there are unaccounted factors in each of the described cases. Nevertheless, some stories that could not be explained. My dad and mom were taller and she was short. Dr. Jim Tucker received a letter from a family in Glasgow. 5-year-old Cameron told his mother Norma that he had another mom and she lives on Barra. Barra is an island off the west coast of Scotland. At that time, about 1,000 people lived there.
How the child even learned about this island is unclear. He told a consistent story over several years.
My favorite place in Bala was the beach, and I took my dog with me and I play with him and my brothers and sisters so play.
Researchers organized a group with Dr. Tucker and the boy's family. They wanted to take him to the island and see what he would say there. Dr. Tucker met with Cameron's family. Norma. The child's mother said that Cameron began talking about a second family from Barra when he was about 2.5 years old. He said, "I want to go to Barra to my other family," and he was completely adamant. He talked about Barra every day, hundreds of times, both at home and at kindergarten. He described his family in detail, saying that his father's name was Shane Robertson.
Very happy. Not at all. Let's not work at all. Okay.
He said that his father died. He stepped off the sidewalk and was hit by a car. Cameron even mentioned the color of the car was green. He said he had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. That the family lived in a white house, which was much larger than the one he lived in with Norma. This house had several bathrooms. He talked a lot about what he did at the bar. He said he swam in stone pools, went to the beach, and played with friends. Cameron never said that he was an adult. Even in his previous life, he described himself as a child, and he never said that he died. Instead, he said that he fell. He fell and ended up with Norma. Another interesting and important detail. Cameron said he admired from the bar how planes landed on the beach. He spoke with great excitement about his other family, pointing out many things. Details and specifics. Dr. Tucker, along with Cameron and his mother, went to the bar, and very quickly they encountered their first surprise. A British Airways plane unexpectedly touched down on the beach, which served as a runway. For the airport, this is the only airport in the world where a regular flight amazingly uses the beach as a runway. How the boy could have known this is unclear.
Where is yours from?
He was beaming and said he was happy to be back here. The group immediately went to the Heritage Center to meet with a local historian. He listened to the boy's story. He said that indoor toilets in houses only became common in the 1950s and 1960s. A house with many toilets, as Cameron claimed, must have been quite recent. He also said that swimming in stone pools, as Cameron claimed, was a very common occurrence. Well, the most important thing he said was that the Robinson family actually lived on this island, at its northern tip. They were a seafaring family who had a house on the bar in the 60s, 70s. A large white house on the shore. The next day, the group went to this house. The current caretaker let them inside. Dr. Tucker writes in his book, as we walked through the house, Cameron behaved as if it was familiar to him. When we sat by the campfire, Cameron looked very sad. Norma asked if he missed his mother. He nodded and rested his head against her chest. So despite the fact that the original identity could not be found, Cameron did mention a lot of accurate details, which is completely unclear how they got into his head. But this story has one very big downside. Television. The entire trip to the bar was filmed as a report for a television show. A show about extraordinary phenomena. For example, Jim Tucker writes in his book, "When I contacted the local historian, I quickly found out that the TV crew had spoken to him earlier when they were scouting the island, and he already knew that we were looking for Shane Roberts." Well, you decide for yourself. Does Cameron really remember his past life, or were the TV crew just conducting an investigation? Or did Cameron learn about his past life precisely from the program editors? Of course, regressive hypnosis is a pseudoscientific technique. Scientists believe that this kind of memory can be explained as results of imagination, illusion, suggestion, or caused by distorted or false memories. But here is one case that could not be explained. Ian Stevenson examined a 37-year-old American woman. During a session of regressive hypnosis, she identified herself as Johnson Jacobi, a Swedish farmer. But the main thing in this story is that she started speaking in Swedish. Under Stevenson's guidance, she underwent 2 polygraph tests, a verbal association test, and a language aptitude test. She passed all these tests as if she was thinking in Swedish. In the professional psychology community, it is generally considered unethical to subject a person to traumatic memories in order to study their memory. This is a Tibetan monastery. Buddhists lined up in a long queue to see the child. They believe that this 5-year-old boy, reincarnated as the Supreme Lama, is the 88-year-old monk who recently passed away, and the 5-year-old boy truly behaves accordingly. Friends, there were many comments under the first video that all the cases are not from Russia. Firstly, yes, it's funny because UFOs always land in New York, as we know. But I will explain. I only talk about cases described by specific scientists who traveled around the world, investigated these cases, and then documented them in their research. I only discuss these to avoid delving entirely into mysticism and the paranormal. I'm already walking a fine line with this topic. That's why there are no stories from Russia. But I will tell you about one Russian scientist.
My main job, I am a fundament. I am engaged in fundamental psychophysiology.
Alexander Kaplan, neurophysiologist, Doctor of Biological Sciences, Professor at the Faculty of Biology, Moscow State University.
I've always had the same interest. I'm interested in how the human brain works.
He began studying the brains of Tibetan monks, right at the moment of meditation. A unique experiment that no one had ever conducted before, simply because scientists were not allowed access to them. Using special sensors, they studied changes in blood flow in the monk's brain.
A technique for registering blood flow or blood oxygen saturation, directly in the court, from the surface of the brain, was developed quite recently. This is the cerebral cortex.
When we talk about meditation, it's a special state of the brain, and it's not something we often discuss in everyday life. It's not what is promoted on social media. Tantric meditations were kept secret for a long time. No one was allowed into tantric monasteries. The monks there have a special regulation that explains how to properly enter meditation. There are a total of 9 levels of meditation. The first level is detachment, with focusing attention. This is exactly what is practiced in Western culture. And this is just the first level. The second stage is visualization. They train their brain to recreate images as accurately as possible. Try to imagine anything, the face of a loved one. These will be certain features, vague images. Monks aim to visualize the desired as accurately as possible. so that a vivid image of what is imagined is before their eyes. The second level is already inaccessible to most monks. The third stage is dissolution. All images should slowly, gradually dissolve. Moreover, if this happens quickly, you need to start over. The final stage is called clear light. The only thing you feel at this point is that you are present, and nothing more.
Our task is to understand what patterns exist when progressing from the first stage to the eighth stage.
The thing is, Buddhists believe that our consciousness cannot appear from nothing, just as everything around consciousness came from somewhere. The chair you are sitting on came from somewhere, someone made it out of something. So, according to their belief, a thought also came from somewhere and was created by someone. Hence, the belief in reincarnation. The case described by Jim Tucker in the book Return to Life, where the mother not only recorded her daughter's statements, but also conducted tests that she passed. Olivia is a British girl whose family lived in different parts of the world. Her mother was raised Catholic, but as she grew up, she was not interested in religion. When Olivia was 2 years old, she was walking with her mother, and her mother asked, "What time do you think it is, Olivia?" 7 o'clock. She replied, then added, 1789. And her mother asked again, "What?" Olivia thought for a moment, and confidently replied, "No, 1787. How she said this at 2 years old is unclear. Olivia once came to her mother and quite casually and calmly said that her name was Daisy. The mother ignored this game of her daughter's for a long time, but the incidents occurred more and more frequently. Sometime later, she approached her mother again and said, "Robinson." The mother asked what it meant, and Olivia replied, "It's a name. It was my name." Olivia more and more frequently and in greater detail described the life of a certain Daisy Robinson. She lived in the 1780s, sheared sheep, and made blankets from the wool. Where could Olivia have picked up such... Which character? It's unclear. One day, Olivia approached her mother while she was doing household chores, pointed to the center of her chest, and said, "All the air came out from here." Her mother didn't understand what she was talking about. "What air? From here?" And I died. But I don't like to talk about it. She became sad, turned around, and left the room. The mother was in shock. Olivia had never had any contact with death in her life. I was 30 years old when I died. 30 years. And I died because I didn't eat anything. At some point, the mother herself began to believe that her daughter was talking about her past life, as if she was trying to make logical connections herself. For example, she began to think that her daughter's insatiable appetite from birth could be explained by the hunger she experienced in her past life. Guys, here's a great excuse to eat at night. You were starving in a past life. One day, after waking up from a nap, Olivia, sitting on her cot, began to talk about her life in the 1880s. The mother questioned her for a long time, trying to find out some details and catch her in a lie, or at least where she was getting all this information from. The mother asked if Olivia knew any songs she used to listen to back then. The daughter immediately said, "London Bridge is Falling Down." It's her favorite song. If you type "London Bridge is Falling Down" into YouTube now, you'll hear a children's song. But the events described in the book are from the early 2000s, which means YouTube might not have existed yet. The mother started looking for information about this song, and it turned out that the words of an early version appeared in a songbook around 1744. Another time, the daughter said that her mother's name was Kitty. Olivia's stories about her past life stopped around the age of 3. Her mother thought that was it. Her daughter just got tired of the game. But no, when Olivia turned 4, their dog died. Her daughter's reasoning was so strange at that time that the mother wrote it down on paper. Olivia pondered, will the dog come back as another dog again? I've seen that happen. First, you spend some time being dead, like a few weeks or a few months. The mother asked if that had ever happened to her. The daughter answered affirmatively. When the mother asked where she was after death, Olivia replied that she didn't exist. It's hard to explain. I kind of dissolved into the air, crumbled into dust. She said it wasn't scary, and when she crumbled,
she met other people. The mother asked if she was afraid.
Is Bojana now afraid of death? Olivia replied that she is not. She's not afraid, but the thought of death makes her sad because she simply enjoys being on Earth. When they talked about Daisy's life, Olivia mentioned that she lived in a small town. She didn't remember its name, but she remembered that it is located in England. The mother, with an impassive face, asked, "What if there's a McDonald's there?" Olivia laughed and said it hasn't been invented yet. She said that there aren't even any cars. Everyone traveled on horses. Olivia then mentioned one detail. She remembered that the money used back then had a king on it. The coins were uneven at the edges and very flat. Then the mother decided to test her daughter. She researched English coins from the year 1787. All of them had a picture of King George III. They indeed had serrated edges and were flatter than modern coins. She decided to show Olivia the photographed various coins. A total of 52 photographs, ranging from ancient Celtic and Roman coins to modern ones. She asked Olivia if any of the coins looked familiar to her. Olivia immediately pointed to the George III shilling from 1787. She pointed to 3 other coins that she claimed to remember. All of them were coins of George III. How a 5-year-old girl was able to do this could not be determined. As I mentioned, Buddhists believe that our consciousness cannot arise from nothing. That is to say, literally, consciousness exists in our real world. But what is reality? Look around. Everything you see is not as it appears. The human eye is an organ created by evolution, by nature, and it sees exactly as much as nature requires for a person to continue their existence. No more. A person does not see electromagnetic waves, X-rays, radiation, and so on. But instruments do see them, which means all of this exists in the real world. Can you imagine that? The image that forms in your head deceives you. Our sensors do not capture everything. This image is just enough to keep living. But the world is not like that. So here's the question. What if consciousness is material?
Shh. It's just that we don't have sensors to detect it yet. The very first case studied by Dr. Tucker was a little boy named Patrick. Patrick's mother claimed that her son was the reincarnation of her deceased stepbrother. Although Patrick's case was a family one, meaning that such cases often involve false memories, where family members unconsciously lie, it had another important feature. Patrick had 3 birthmarks that clearly corresponded to the wounds on his mother's stepbrother's body. Ian Stevenson organized a 3-day trip with a carefully thought-out plan. On the first day, a long interview with the family. On the second day, another interview to address any questions that were missed. The third, today's interview with other people involved in Patrick's life. Dr. Tucker writes in his book about how he and Ian Stevenson arrived at Patrick's house and sat in the living room with his mother, Lisa. Ian took a tablet and a tape recorder out of his bag and began asking Lisa about her late son, whose life Patrick seemed to remember. Ian asked her to start from the moment her son first became ill. In a steady voice, she began the story. His name was Kevin. He was born 20 years ago. Lisa, a young mother, and Kevin were doing well, until Kevin began to limp at 16 months old. At first it was irregular, but after 3 weeks he was limping constantly. Lisa took him to the doctor. Kevin was hospitalized for 3 days and underwent various examinations. An X-ray showed fluid in the left hip joint. The doctor then thought it might be infected. Kevin was still limping when he was discharged, and just 2 days at home, he fell and broke his leg. The child was put in a cast, but it was so painful that it had to be removed after 3 days. By that time, he refused to leave the house at all due to severe pain. Lisa took him to another doctor, an orthopedic surgeon. He ordered several more X-rays, and they showed destruction of the leg in 2 places. Kevin was hospitalized again. For a long time, no one could understand what was happening to him, why he was ill. No one could make a diagnosis. Finally, in another hospital, the doctors determined neuroblastoma.
It's a cancer that starts in nerve tissue somewhere in the body and then spreads to other places. Then there was chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and Kevin did not overcome the illness. Lisa continued to live after Kevin's death, got married, and gave birth to a daughter, Sarah. The couple divorced after 4 years. Then she remarried and gave birth to her second son, Jason. And then, Patrick. At birth, Patrick's left eye was covered with a light haze. This is corneal leucoma. Patrick is almost blind in his left eye, just as Kevin was blind in that eye at the very end of his life. Later, Kevin had a bump above his right ear, exactly where Kevin's tumor biopsy was performed. Ian Stevenson, upon examining the child, confirmed that the bump was indeed present. One of the most inexplicable features of this case was that Patrick limped. He had an unusual gait, swinging his left leg. This matched the way Kevin, because he had to wear a brace after he broke his leg. Scientists asked Patrick to walk around the room several times, and he was still limping at the age of 5. And most importantly, he had no medical reasons for this. When Patrick was 4 years old, he began talking about Kevin's life. The first thing he said was that he wanted to go to his other house. Lisa asked, why? And the boy replied, "Don't you remember? I left you there." Lisa asked Patrick what their house looked like, and he accurately said, chocolate orange color. The house was indeed orange-brown, but Patrick had never seen it. One day when Lisa was getting ready for work, Patrick asked her if she remembered when he had surgery. The mother replied that Patrick had never had surgery. Of course there was, right here, on my ear. Another time Patrick was thrilled when he saw a picture of Kevin. He had never seen him before because Lisa didn't keep his photos at home. "Here's my picture. I was looking for it. That's me." Patrick also talked about a little brown puppy that he never had. But Kevin had one. Lisa gave it to him. A huge number of precise and inexplicable statements. Although there is one major downside to this story. Lisa said that in the maternity ward, as soon as the nurses handed Patrick to her, she imagined a weight lifting off her, as if her grief for Kevin was being released. In other words, the thought that Patrick was Kevin was in her mind from the start, even before discovering all the similarities, and before all the conversations with Patrick. In other words, she is biased. She believed in reincarnation and perhaps comforted herself in this way. Perhaps it's a unique way to cope with grief. Believing in this, the mother might have unconsciously lied and made things up. There is only one thing in this story that remains unexplained. Dr. Stevenson checked the hospital records, and all the information about Patrick's birthmarks, which matched Kevin's wounds, turned out to be true. 2 years later, researchers visited Patrick and Lisa, and the boy continued to say very strange things. A few months before the second meeting, while the mother was preparing dinner, Patrick suddenly started talking to her. "Do you know that you have a relative that no one talks about? I saw him before I was born. He was tall and thin, brown hair and brown eyes. He said his name was Billy, and they called him Billy the Pirate. And he was killed by his stepfather, shot point blank in the mountains. He's upset that no one talks about him after death." Lisa knew nothing about any relative, and it seemed to her like complete nonsense. She called to ask her mother, who replied that her mother's older sister had a son named Billy. Billy was killed by his stepfather 3 years before Lisa was born. The family never talked about the murder. When Lisa asked about the nickname Pirate Billy, her mother laughed. "I haven't heard that nickname since Billy's death." What is consciousness? That's the question of all questions. It's not clear at all. There is no comprehensive definition. In general, in theory, consciousness is an anomaly because we have no idea how it appeared in the process of evolution and for what purpose. Or another question, do we even possess consciousness at all? How to define it? Max Planck, the founder of quantum physics, wrote, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness." Andre Linde, a physicist from Stanford University, says, I have doubts that consciousness can be excluded from modern science. We usually consider that the world consists of matter, and consciousness is only needed to understand what matter is. It seems to me that such a viewpoint is primitive. The best definition of what consciousness is was given by Thomas Nagel, an American philosopher. In 1974, he published an article titled, "What is it like to be a bat?" In this article, he writes that science has long studied the behavior of bats and all their physiology. But what does it mean to be a bat? That is the question. A human perceives the world through 5 senses, while a bat uses echolocation. To understand what it is like to be a bat, a person would need to experience the same as the bat does, and that is simply impossible. Suppose you can understand, see, and feel, say, a red lamp, but you can never explain what it is like to see a red lamp to a colorblind person. The same goes for consciousness. We cannot describe it, nor can we even prove its existence. Dr. Tucker describes such an intriguing case. Kathleen, the mother of 3-year-old Nicole, wrote such a letter to Tucker. One day, Kathleen put her little daughter on a horse, and she grabbed the saddle with her left hand and the reins with her right, straightened up, and started to buck as if she were a pro. Riding the horse, it was as if some kind of mechanical memory kicked in, and she knew how to behave. Her parents didn't own horses, knew little about them, yet Nicole uttered a series of horseback riding commands. The doctor wrote in a reply letter that this doesn't say much. Who knows where the girl could have picked up all these actions? And then, the mother told far more eerie things. Kathleen had a brother, Mike, who is no longer alive. For the last 25 years of his life, he was confined to a wheelchair after being hit by a train when he was a child. He often said that he remembered that last sound before the impact, the sound of wheels on the tracks. That sound haunted him. Kathleen saw him only when she was very young, 20 years ago. She called him Mikey. She was the only one who called him that. One morning at breakfast, Kathleen noticed that little Nicole was staring intently out the window. Nicole started shouting in response, "Mikey! Mikey! Mikey!" She couldn't possibly know her uncle. They had never met. Where do you see Mikey? Right here, in the chair. When Nicole turned 3, her mom asked her if she had ever seen Mikey. No. But I remember him. What do you remember? I remember that train. Kathleen was horrified. They never talked about the accident. Nicole said she remembered the sound of the wheels. Over time, Nicole began talking about her home. She claimed that she lived on C Street. She said she lived there with her father, sisters, and best friend. She was the middle of 3 sisters. She also talked about her father, who cut branches from trees, chopped down large old trees, and sent them floating down the water. She constantly said that the house on C Street burned down. Then she asked her mom if she could take her home to C Street. She talked a lot about the fire there, but she didn't die in it. When Nicole was 5.5 years old, the family visited a gallery in a nearby town. Nicole noticed a handmade black box with a speaker horn on top. She suddenly stopped and said, "Wow, I haven't seen one of these in years." Kathleen asked if Nicole knew what it was. She replied, "Yes, Mom, it's a recording player. We had one like this." For the next 20 minutes, Nicole hummed songs that she claimed to have listened to from this player. How could the girl know what a phonograph with a horn speaker was? It's unclear. Dr. Tucker began searching for a town that matched the description. A coastal town where the residents were engaged in logging and smelting. A major fire in the city was averted, and they found a suitable city as much as possible. Virginia City, Nevada. The Nicole family, along with Dr. Tucker, went to Nevada. Virginia City was a thriving town in the 1800s. Minerals were extracted there. Those times are long gone, and the city's population is less than 1,000 people. Nevertheless, it is still a tourist attraction. When the group arrived in the city, Dr. Tucker quickly discovered that the center of activity in Virginia City is C Street. Throughout the visit, Nicole was silent. She did not want to discuss any details, especially with her parents. She showed emotions. Nicole only once. When their plane took off from the airport, they flew home. Nicole suddenly burst into tears. "I don't want to leave here." Kathleen asked if her daughter really thought that Virginia City was the very city from her past life. "No, I know it for sure." What seems suspicious to me about this story? The book by Tucker contains the mother's testimony. She recounted that once, when Nicole was 7 years old, she was getting into the car to go to school and suddenly stopped, closed her eyes, and tilted her head back. I feel an earthquake is coming. In other words, the mother attributes almost psychic abilities to her daughter. One of Dr. West's patients, Kathleen, during a session of regressive hypnosis, gave him quite a shock. She mentioned that she was in a suspended state. Most importantly, she said she could see Dr. West's father and his son. Your father is here and your son a little child. Your father says you will recognize him because his name is Adam and you named the child after him. He died due to heart problems. The patient knew details of the doctor's personal life, but she knew nothing about the fact that the doctor had lost his first child. His name was indeed Adam, and he died at the age of 23 due to heart problems. Another study by Stevenson concerns a Burmese girl named Ma Wintar. She was born in 1962, and at the age of 3 began talking about the life of a Japanese soldier. This soldier was captured by the residents of a Burmese village. Then he was tied to a tree and set on fire. There were no detailed accounts in her story. However, Simonson says that all of this could have been true. In 1945, the residents of Burma could indeed have captured a prisoner, someone from the soldiers who lagged behind the retreating Japanese army. And burning at the stake was indeed a method of execution used at that time. Ma Winter exhibited traits that were not typical for a Burmese girl. She liked to cut her hair short. She enjoyed dressing in men's clothing, and later it was even forbidden for her to do so. She rejected spicy food in favor of sweet. Ma Winter rejected Buddhism, practiced by her family, to the point where she called herself a foreigner. Perhaps in this case, researchers are aligning the necessary factors to fit the outcome, but one thing remains unclear. The strangest part here is that Ma Winter was born with severe congenital defects in her hands. There were webbed fingers between her middle and ring fingers, and these fingers were amputated when she was just a few days old. The other fingers had rings, as if they had been tightly squeezed by something. Her left wrist also had a ring consisting of 3 separate indentations. All these defects were incredibly similar to burns left by the rope, with which a Japanese soldier was tied to a tree before being executed. What is there after death? One of Ian Stevenson's cases, Purnima and Konayaki, who claimed to have been reincarnated, recalled her death. She said she floated in the air for several days in semi-darkness. She saw people mourning her and saw her body at the funeral. She said that many people were floating around. Then she saw a light, went towards it, and came to her new family. The Tlingit, a tribe in Alaska, often make predictions about rebirth. In 10 out of 46 cases, the previous life of the individual made predictions about their subsequent reincarnation. In 8 out of 10 cases, the person named the parents to whom they wanted to be reborn. For example, a person named Victor Vincent told his niece that he was going to come back as her son. It's creepy to hear something like that. He showed her 2 scars, which he had left from a minor surgery. He predicted that he would carry them into his next life. 8 months after he died, the niece gave birth to a boy. This boy had birthmarks, exactly in those same places. One of the birthmarks even had small round marks that resembled the look of stitches from surgical suture. The case of Indika Ishwarya. He was born in Sri Lanka in 1972. At the age of 3, he began to say that he had another home 50 kilometers from this one. He talked about many details regarding the family, the sister, the parents. He even mentioned a dog that lived with him. The child was brought to his native home, and the family says he began addressing the locals by name. Both families were completely convinced that the child had been reincarnated. But since this entire story is just told from the parents' words, it's simply impossible to verify it. They could have said anything. What's interesting in this story is something else. Ian Stevenson writes that during one of the trips, the child began to search for something around the house. He walked intently along the wall, feeling. And then he discovered a scratched inscription on the wall. It had the name Darshana and the year 1965 written on it. The inscription was made when the concrete was still soft. The family living in that house didn't even notice that there was something on the wall. But the child knew. This is 82-year-old Emma Michel. When she was 4 years old, the body of her older brother Jimmy was pulled from the river. No one knew what happened to him. Everyone thought it was an accident, that he simply slipped and fell. Many years later, Emma's grandson was playing on the floor next to her. A bell sound rang out from outside the window.
Grandma, why are the bells ringing?
Our neighbor has passed away.
Who?
Donald Gray.
It was because of him that I died. He hired 3 people who killed me.
Outside, the Volga is not lying down.
He described in detail how he was dealt with and thrown into the river because of a dispute over fishing rights, even though the child had not been familiar with his uncle for a long time. And another interesting detail, the child repeated the fate of the original person. He also died on the river under mysterious circumstances. Ian Stevenson also describes the case of a boy born with a defect in his ear and with memories of his past life. He claimed that he died from a gunshot wound. He was a Turkish peasant, and when he went to sleep in the pasture, he was shot by a neighbor because he simply mistook his stomach. Ian Stevenson went to the medical archive where he found a report on the man and about his death. Here's a case from India in the 1970s. A little boy lost his fingers when he put them into a mill. He didn't live long, and after his death, a child was born in a neighboring village with exactly the same defect. Most importantly, he mentioned many details about the life of the first child. For Buddhists, the external world.
It also exists, but we only experience what is in our heads. That is why, according to Buddhist teaching, by the efforts of thought alone, one can destroy suffering, conquer evil, discover it for oneself, some new knowledge. Whether this is true or not, I do not know. But if thought is material, I imagine you liking this video and writing comments. And now subscribing. Thank you for watching this video. A new story is coming soon. Goodbye.